Ministers and government leaders, bishops and pastors, church leaders, esteemed ladies and gentlemen. The next session is about the case study of Singapore on national transformation. Singapore was a little colony of Britain for about 150 years. And after the war, the whole little island state colony was devastated. I was born during that time, and I remember my British, my citizenship is British subject in those days. Some of you came from that era, and you know what I mean. We sing God Save the King. Then the king died, and we have to sing God Save the Queen. Then we were caught up with the big wave for independence, starting from India, and Ghana was the first African country, and it was going on all over the British Empire. Finally, in the 1963, the year 1963, Great Britain granted us independence. But we were 4 colonies or 4 states in Southeast Asia: Malaya, Sabah, Sarawak, and Singapore. These 4 states were all too small. And Britain said, if you want independence, you need to come together and form a nation. And that's how the nation of Malaysia was born in 1963. So we became a new nation, and during that time, we learned to sing another new anthem, national anthem. So that was the 3rd national anthem. But for 2 years, we debated, argued, and tried to find a common ground for the vision and the values of this new nation called Malaysia. We argued, and we could not agree, because some of the leaders, the founding leaders at that time, say, yes, we agree with equality, but some of us need to be more equal than others. So we said, that's not the way to start a nation. So finally, we were asked to leave this new country called Malaysia. And so in 1965, Singapore was born. And there I learned to sing the new national anthem. So I want to share with you, for those of you who can see the map there, we are almost straight east from Africa. That dot there is Singapore. And so we are just 5 degrees north of the equator. This is the island of Singapore that you see from a satellite. It's a satellite photo. And in this picture, you see from the west here, from the east to the west, it's only 43 kilometers. That's all. And then from the north to the south, from the north here to the south, it's only 23 kilometers. So this is a very small island. For those of you who are used to driving very fast, be careful, you may end up in the water. But this little country state is about 710 square kilometers. But now, today, if you go to Singapore, you will not feel crowded, because it's very well planned. And you can travel on the surface, on the land, and you can travel underground too. When you have a small place like this, you learn to maximize the space upwards and downwards. Okay? So we have roads, we have rail that is underground, we even have storage facilities, And so come to Singapore, you find it is a very well-planned modern country. Then, I want to show you the picture of Singapore in the 1960s, when we gained independence. The whole Singapore was a slum. Every direction, north, south, east, west, every direction you turn, this whole island was a very, very poor. You can call it a slum. And people live in thatched huts and water that is not clean. They dig wells, they try to have to live, and it's very unclean, unhealthy, unsanitary. But today you come to Singapore, this is the same Singapore. All the homes are modern homes. There's no more slum, not one slum. The only place we take you to a theme park and see this was Singapore before. But now everyone lives in modern homes, and there are green areas, there's a place for everything. There's place to live, there's place to work, schools, recreation, entertainment, commerce, business, market, everywhere you want, there is a place for everything. This is modern Singapore. Everyone lives in a modern home. On the left, on the bottom slide, is the central business district of Singapore. This is the river called the Singapore River. It's a very important, the lifeblood of Singapore in the early days. If you remember in the early days, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the Spaniards, the British, they all came because this Southeast Asia was the center of the spice trade. All the spices were produced from that area. So Singapore River was a place where all the different traders come and do barter trade. This same river today is here, and you can see a modern metropolis in the same location. I want to share with you quickly the socio-economic condition of Singapore. At the time of independence in the mid-60s, it was an appalling place. Okay? And poverty, there was massive, abject poverty everywhere. It was normal for everyone to be poor. Your friends are poor, your neighbors are poor, and you try to help each other. And the family that can have 3 good solid meals is a very fortunate family. And people were all very poor. Unemployment was massive everywhere. People try to make a living, just to do anything. They'll carry things for you, they'll move things for you, anything to find, make an honest living. Then, the foreign investment in Singapore at that time, nothing much to speak of. Who wants to come to a place that is so poor, that is so many unemployed people, and even undeveloped, totally undeveloped? Education in Singapore was very bad, although the British were known to provide one of the best educational systems among the colonial, the colonial masters that come to different parts of the world at that time. Even with their being known as a colony that will leave behind good educational and judicial system, at that time Singapore's education was very poor. I remember we had O-levels and A-levels in those days, and the average O-level student would talk to each other and say, if I don't do well in this O-level Oxford Cambridge exam, I will be a teacher. Now, this sounds, you laugh, but in those days it was no laughing matter. It was serious, because everyone wants to go into a blue-collar job, to work in the bank, in the aircon room, shirt and tie, and if you cannot find a good office job, then you think about being a teacher. Because in those days, the teaching profession pays very poorly. And so people don't want to be a teacher. And of course, with bad teachers, you have bad education. Health-wise, Singapore has every kind of health problem that you have today that is known. You have malaria, we have malaria, tuberculosis, smallpox, chickenpox, all kinds of pox. And, we have every disease, polio, typhoid, and corolla. So if infant mortality rate was very high. Babies don't make it to adulthood. Very often they die before they even reach their first year, birthday. So the health condition was very poor. And also, housing. I came to Africa about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and when you like to bring tourists to see the African thatch huts, right? I told them I've seen it in Singapore when I was growing up. Our roofs were made of dry palm leaves, so we understand that. And the walls were made of just very rough sawn timber, and then you have just plain old cement, or you got luck. That's when those who can afford it. Otherwise, just dirt floor. And then in a hut, sometimes you have two families sharing it. And you have one room for the whole family, that's it. So housing was very poor, and sanitation is open sanitation. And if you're lucky, that small village have one pipe of running water that is shared by the whole community. Otherwise, there's a well that is dug in, a shallow well, and people share from it. Then, corruption was everywhere in Singapore. In those days, in the public sector as well as in the private sector, everyone was corrupt. It was systemic. And when you ask for favor and help, you must bring something. You never go empty-handed. If you are poor, bring some eggs, some fruits, go to the back of your house, grab some food. If you can afford, give a chicken, or you can buy a box of biscuit. Everybody brings something, and you always bring something. If you are rich, you give more. So corruption was everywhere, in the public sector, in government, in private. It was just the normal life. Then, the political climate was very unstable. After the war, there were many people with different prevailing philosophies and ideologies trying to take over Singapore. So there were different political parties. Some were quite extreme, and some were racialistic. So they all tried to share their manifesto and their ideas. Security and law and order was very bad. Now, you all have gangs and criminal groups. I come from Kenya. They are famous for their mungikis, right? You have your mungiki. Those are young gangsters. In Singapore, we have our triad gangs, triads. And this group, they control every district of Singapore. And anyone doing any small business, whether you're selling food or vegetables or anything, you pay an extortion fee. If you don't pay, the gangs will come and destroy your business. And the gangs will pay the local police of that district to look the other way. So everybody has to pay. All right? And now, what about the infrastructure? In those days, our roads were full of potholes. And most of the streets are not lighted. And when it rains, it floods all the time. So drainage was very bad. And so infrastructure was very poor. Most of the roads are just dirt roads. Only the main streets, you have paved roads. And there was no fast train or slow train. There's just very simple, basic infrastructure. Water was not piped to every home. Many homes have no electricity. We remember using kerosene lamp, candlestick. Those were very common. And blackouts was very part of life. Electricities that are not reliable. Then, when we gained independence in 1963 with part of Malaysia, there was one big country, over 100 million people, population in those days, called Indonesia. Indonesia was under the Dutch colony, was a colony of Netherlands. They were somehow threatened by these 4 states that came together to form Malaysia. On the day that Malaysia was announced as a new nation, Indonesia declared war. Now that is a very scary thing. The day you celebrate your independence, a neighbor declared war on you. And that was how bad it is. But we were thankful that Singapore was the Far East naval base of Great Britain at that time. And Britain has not withdrew the naval base yet. So they provided a protection from Indonesia. But they still send their commandos and their terrorists to set up bombs, like what you are looking at in Kenya today, the siege. We have bombs that go off in a busy area where people die. And then we have the China, who had already gained independence in 1949, or won the civil war between the communist and the non-communist group. And China under Mao Zedong declared that it was their intention to make every countries in Asia and Southeast Asia communist. Now that is very scary, because this big giant country up north wants to make your little island a communist country. And China openly support the Communist Party, underground party in Singapore. USSR was in the thick of the Cold War, and their naval armada, you can see them from the coast, because Singapore is an island. From the beach you can see those big ships coming through, and they can easily land and take over if they want. So we are in a very unstable external threats from these different countries. But the most critical, the greatest crisis that took place is in August 1965, when we were shown the door. We were told, please leave Malaysia. We were kicked out of the country of Malaysia. We have no choice but to go independent. So we are totally independent in August of 1965, and Singapore was born. It was a very traumatic day. I remember that the Prime Minister that day got before the nation, before the media, and he cried. And all of us cried with him. It was very sobering, because everyone predicted our doom, that there's no way we can survive. Singapore is a rock island. We have no hinterland. We have no minerals. We don't even have water. We have to buy water from Malaysia, our neighbor, immediate neighbor. And it was a treaty treaties have been arranged before independence, that Malaysia, South Malaysia, will sell us their raw water with cash. And so that's how we started. Totally no resources, no natural resources, no minerals, no oil, no gas. That's how we started. Now, when we started, we were blessed with a group of young people, young men and women, who were some of the smartest people at those days. In those days, under the British control, our young people who are smart and intelligent, they get scholarship to go to Mother England to study. And they go to the best universities. They go to Cambridge, they go to Oxford, they go to the London School of Economics, some of the best universities, sit with the elite of the British people and study, and they came back. Many of them not just pass and get their degree, they excelled. They were the top students. Many of them came back with first-class honors. Some of them went on and did masters and PhDs. And when this country was born, of course we call on them. Will you give up your ambition to just have a great life, make a great living, but come and serve the nation? We look to you all to lead us. And we came together, and this was a dream of the founding fathers. We dreamed that together we will build a peaceful, harmonious, prosperous, multiracial, multi-religious, social democratic society that is based on justice, equality, meritocracy, and integrity. That's our dream. We had 4 major races, and we had people who agitate, people who are racialists, and they want one group to dominate the other, to get better privileges. So we have ethnic strife and fightings and even killings. So we said that is not the way to start a nation. How can we put it behind us so that we will never have interracial, interreligious riots and killings, so that we become one people? We are first Singaporeans. Then we celebrate where we came from. See, Singapore was an uninhabited island. It was a jungle. Only the pirates were there. Then the traders came, and many of the traders come from China, the traders come from India, from Arab, Southeast Asia, and many of them stayed on and started their family there. So we came together, and this is our dream, our founding dream. Then we dreamed that we will go from a third world nation to a first world nation in one generation. Because our leaders came back from UK. They have seen, they have tasted the quality of life of a first world nation. They have seen how leaders led and governed the country. And so they came back and they look at Singapore. We are really undeveloped. So how did it happen? Well, the countries like UK, they did not start as first world countries. If you go back to the days of the Vikings, they were just as uncivilized and barbaric. They killed each other all the time. But if you study the history of the development of Europe, of UK, the first world nation, you see they were led by great leaders. And so our leaders came together and said, we want to see Singapore become a first world nation. And we don't want it to be a forever dream. We want to see it in our lifetime. That means even when our hair becomes gray or white, that's fine. But our children, our grandchildren, the generations to come will enjoy a first world nation. But we don't want it to be a long period where we are not around to see it. We want to see it in our lifetime. And one generation is defined by sociologists as 5 years. So in 1965, we set our goal that by the year 2000, 35 years later, we want to see Singapore transform as a nation to become a first world nation, from third world to first world. Then we want this nation to be led by leaders of integrity. We were a totally corrupt society, and we say we want to draw a line and put that behind us. We want leaders who are men and women of integrity, and we want them to lead a corruption-free society. That was our goal, and we meant serious business. The Prime Minister told his cabinet, starting from himself, and all the cabinet members, these are the leaders of the ruling party at that time, they won the election. And he said, none of you must violate this agreement, this covenant. We want to start a new page. All of us will be clean, corruption-free leaders. So they say this is what we'll do to remind ourselves. Every one of us will wear a white shirt and a white pants to work, to remind ourselves that this is a clean government. So that's their official clothing. White shirt, white pants, starting from the Prime Minister. In 35 years, there were 3 cabinet-level ministers who were caught for corruption. These are people who are leaders in the ruling party, close to the first Prime Minister, Lee Kuan Yew. They know each other very well, but they were caught for corruption. And Lee Kuan Yew did not stop the system. They were brought to the court, they were charged in court, and all whatever they stolen were taken back, and they went to prison. All of them, 3 of them. It was a signal very strong, and everyone take this ruling party seriously. You know, in Singapore we have a proverb: kill a chicken and scare the monkeys. So we make it very clear to everyone: no monkey business. If you are caught, you are going to go to jail. So Singapore, we begin to do that to make sure it's not only in the public sector, in the private sector as well. We want leaders of integrity to lead us. Then we say Singapore was too soft. Coming out of the war, malnutrition, you know, everyone was just working, but sometimes we were not productive, we were not hardworking, we were not disciplined. We are too soft, we are not rugged. So the government said, no, we cannot benchmark ourselves with the neighbors. Let us benchmark ourselves with the best practices with the developed country. In every industrial sector, what is the productivity standard? And we want to accomplish that. So we wanted a hard-working, skilled and educated labor force. So we started to do that. We tell everyone, you know, benchmark yourself. If something can be produced at a certain price in a given time, we should be able to do that and do it even cheaper and better quality. So we set our sights on that, on cost as well as quality. Next, we have the value of delaying gratification. In other words, we told our people, starting with the government, we can't have everything at this time. We cannot afford it. Let us put first things first, prioritize our need. And the government realized that when they are called to lead the people, the first thing is to help every family put food on the table. That if the people are hungry and have no jobs, you know, this place cannot progress. So the government is thinking of how to create jobs for the people of Singapore. So we tell the people, delay gratification. You can't have everything you know and you see when you travel or you see in the media. Some things we have to wait. So we ask our people to save. Next, we need national self-reliance. We realize that there are developing countries that go around to the first world countries in the 60s, asking for aid, asking for grant from these wealthy countries. And they spend it, and then they turn around and come back and say, please forgive that loan, that grant. After they have forgiven, please give more. So we said that system doesn't work. We have not seen any country in the developing world that used that system of aid and became developed. There are only two countries in the world. One is Germany, the other one is Japan. They surrendered to the Allied forces after they are being destroyed. So these two countries, America felt, you know, compassionate to help build them up. So if you ever go to war with America, please surrender quickly. Then they will help build you up. Don't try to win them like in Vietnam. You give them a hard time, then you won't get help. No? But there's some truth in that. But anyway, no other countries that are developing countries have ever developed through aid. So we realize that a lot of our problem is not that we don't have resources. Yes, our resources was very small, but we make sure there's no wastage. We make sure that it's well used. So we begin to look at cost cutting and efficiency to make the greatest bang for our buck, to use our money well. So national self-reliance in finance and in security. Why I say security? Because at independence, our army and our police were from Malaysia. Can you imagine running a country with police and soldiers from your neighbor? It's not going to work. So we realized that we have to take care of our own security. So we started to recruit Singaporeans to be in the police force, and then we begin to have our own national service. We create a new army. The people, every man in Singapore have to serve the nation, minimum 2 years. Regardless whether you are the son of the prime minister or millionaire, it does not matter. Every man in Singapore has to serve the nation. So we are a citizens' army in Singapore. Now, next I want to share with you what else we have, what else we dream about. Okay, on the top there, we have the dream to have employment for all, the first one. From a country that has massive unemployment, our dream was to say, before the 35 years is up, we want to make sure that Singapore has full employment. There's a job for everyone. That was our dream. Secondly, we want to make sure that Singaporeans can have modern housing. Everyone, every family can have a home. That was our dream, our vision. And then we want Singapore to have quality education. We don't want that education where only the leftovers of society become our teachers. We want the best people because we realize that they are training, they are educating the future leaders of the nation. We dream about justice for all, not just for the rich and the powerful, but everyone will enjoy justice in Singapore. There will be no impunity. Anyone caught violating, breaking the law, regardless of his status, his socio-economic status, he will face justice. Quality infrastructure. We look for the day where our roads will have potholes. Water will have, when you turn on the tap, you have water and good pressure. No electricity failure. So we look for all the modern things, all the floods can be taken care of because we have engineers. We tell them, you solve the problem. Then we look for, at that time, fiber optic was just discovered. You know, it's a headache to use copper wire for your telephone for the whole country. So we begin from that time when people were still wondering how to use fiber optic. We make a decision to switch from copper wires to fiber optic. Today, Singapore is 100% fiber optic. Every home, every businesses have fiber optic right up to their doorstep. And we dream of a clean, green and safe Singapore, a safe place. Clean means literally all the dirt and trash get removed and cleaned every day. You come to Singapore, it's one of the cleanest cities in the world. The only people who litter, throw whatever they don't want out, are the tourists. No Singaporeans will in his right mind do that. He will keep his trash until he finds a trash can. It is a very green place. At independence, we decide to go around all the equatorial area. I'm sure we came here to many countries in Africa. And we look at your beautiful, beautiful flowers and shrubs and say, can we please have a gift from you? And every country gave us their best flowering plant. We took it to Singapore, 8,000 different varieties of flowering plant, and tested it in our climate. Those that do well, we reproduce them. And today Singapore is a garden city. You come to Singapore, all the trees, you feel at home because some of them are definitely from Africa. We have the African tulip and all the other flowers. All the trees in Singapore regularly get a haircut. You know a haircut? Just like I just did. And so that all the trees are all very well kept in the shrubs. You can walk around in Singapore with your wife, with your daughter, late in the night, 10, 11 o'clock, on the streets, on the shopping. No one will harass you. No one will rob you because it's not worth it. Anyone who is arrested for robbing get caning as well as imprisonment. This caning is not like the teacher, you know, naughty boy. They strip you. Woman is exempted, but men, they strip you and tie you on a table. And they even put a doctor there to make sure you don't die. And they will, when they put this cane, it's not done by an ordinary man, it's done by an executioner. So when the cane comes down and goes up, your skin comes up with it. So every criminal is terrified when you mention about caning. And robbery is compulsory caning. Now, how did the founding fathers build capacity for the nation? One of the responsibility of leaders, national leaders, or any leaders, is to build capacity for the organization, the institution that you are called to leadership. And to build capacity in your people. So the country, the government came together and say, Singapore is not attractive, Singapore is not competitive, nobody wants to come to a place like this. How do we build capacity in Singapore so that it's capable and is able to do business, to provide services, to attract investment, and to be able to grow? So these are some of the institutions that Singapore government, the leaders in the founding years dream about. The first institution is for industrialization. This is called the Jurong Town Corporation. Singapore at that time, we have 1/4 of the island. Although it's so small, 1/4 of it is covered by mangrove swamps. You know mangrove, right? Some of you are, if you are staying near the coast, it's intertidal. When the tide is up, it's all covered by mangrove, but mangrove trees live there. Then when the tide go down, the place become muddy. And that place is usually characterized by malaria, by crocodiles, by snakes. So most people stay away from that. Mangrove swamps are a place of disease. So you cannot afford 1/4 of your little island that is totally like a wasteland. So the first thing we did was to find the smartest guy and most qualified, Dr. Goh Keng Swee. He came back from London School of Economics with a PhD. We say, sir, solve that problem. Create an industrial city for us. And that's what he did. Because our job was to attract the foreign direct investments from the multinational corporations around the world to come to Singapore to put up their factories and their manufacturing facilities so that we will create a lot of jobs. So this institution was created to design and develop the physical development, clean up and drain off the swamps, and put in the best infrastructure of those days. We have fiber optics, we have drainage, we have sewerage, we have good roads, we have lightings, and we put in power plants, everything that will attract a foreign investor to come to Singapore. What we call the key performance indicator. How much is your investment? And then with that business plan, how many jobs can you create? So we were looking for what we call labor-intensive industries. We did that. Second 10 years, when many people get into factories and get jobs, simple jobs, but low pay was better than no pay at that time. After we were able to get many people out of unemployment, we began to go for the second phase of industrialization. We went from what we call mechanization or automation. That was our second phase in our industries. Then, the third 10 years, we went on technology-intensive industries. Today, Singapore go for knowledge-based industry. Biotechnology, bioengineering, some of the most modern largest pharmaceutical companies in the world come to Singapore because now the labor force is highly skilled, highly educated. Then, the next thing we did was create, at the same time, what we call the Economic Development Board. This is an institution that goes out like a national marketing firm, goes out to all the first world countries and knock at their doors of the multinational corporation. Say, sir, madam, why don't you consider putting a factory in Singapore, a manufacturing plant? We will make you an offer so good you will not refuse. Tell us what you need. And anything, we make a list for them. And this is a true one-stop shop. You know, today, even today, foreign investors, when they come to some of our countries, they have to go to like 40, 50 offices to get permits, to get license, approval. And it's a pain. And everywhere they go, they have to bribe the officials. In Singapore, one-stop shop. You come and you tell them what size factory you want, how much electricity you want, how much water, and how many visas you need for how many families. Everything is granted, and what kind of operating business license you need. In the old days, you wait for 9 months to 1 year to get your license. Today in Singapore, you submit it electronically in the morning, online. In 1 hour, you get your license. 1 hour, you get your business license. So these two institutions build capacity in Singapore. Thirdly, we have the Urban Redevelopment Authority. Singapore in the early days, everybody break every rule. You know, private or people build buildings that are unsafe, do not follow codes, so it's fire hazard, it's health hazard, everything. They encroach on land that does not belong to them. So all kinds of problems you see in developing countries. This body was established to redevelop the whole country. And today they were successful in making Singapore a modern nation, transforms Singapore physically. And they are totally, non-biased, regardless whether you are religious or you are no powerful group. Once the rule is set up, everybody follow. There's no exception. All right, government and private sector. Even religious bodies that violate their rules, they come and tell you, take down, tear down, and do it properly. So this is known to be a very fair institution. The next institution that was established to build capacity for the people is what we call the Central Provident Fund. The Central Provident Fund is really a comprehensive retirement fund. But it is done legally, and it requires that every citizen in Singapore must save. You must put 20% of your gross salary in these savings. This is not a tax, it's a savings. Like you put your money in your savings bank. So a savings means you are entitled to interest, right? For what you put in. If you make 1,000, you take home 800 and 200 go into this fund. That's the first law. The second law requires that the employer, private employer as well as the government in the public sector also contribute an equivalent amount, say another 20%. Only the employer is allowed to vary, and the government tells you when to vary. When the economy is doing well, they go up to 20%, 25% contribution. Now, if I contribute 20% and my employer contribute 20%, that's 40% of my salary is saved every month. Make sense? Now, that is a huge saving. And with that, the government used the money to put into 3 accounts or 3 pots. First one is for retirement. So that every Singaporean, when he's old and retired, he will not be a burden to the state. He can live comfortably. Secondly, which is about 75% of this contribution, is set aside in an account for housing, so that every Singaporean can have a home, even as he's a young person. You don't wait until you are 50s and 60s to get a home. At 20 years old, you can get a home in Singapore. Just find a good spouse, get married together, you get a job, and you contribute, and the government lends money to you to buy a new home. The third account is for catastrophic medical insurance. Not the cough and cold, but for cancer, for accident, for surgery, hospitalization. That will wipe out your life saving. And the government protects you from that. So with this contribution, the government now have a very good safety net for the country, and everyone is provided a home. Next, the government then have set up an institution called the Housing and Development Board. This Housing and Development Board now has money. Where does the money come? The one in the Central Provident Fund, when you contribute, every dollar is sent into the treasury. Now the government has a lot of money. In exchange, the government gives you a treasury bond guaranteeing that your deposit, your savings deposit, earns 2.5%. 2.5% interest rate a year. Is that good? Yes, that's good. Today, any bank in Africa, they barely give you 1% if you put your money there. Agree? And when you borrow from them, what ask for? You know better. Some of you are paying 20%, 23, 25%. Look at the spread. How big is the spread? Huge spread. 1% to 25% is 24% difference. That's why the bank are all making billions of dollars in Africa. It is cruel, it's daylight robbery. In Singapore, we now are guaranteed 2.5%. When we want to have our home, a young man just finished university, gets a spouse and get married. He hasn't worked long enough. How can he afford a house? Well, the government says this: you just pay 25% or 20% of the cost of the house, the apartment, and the government will lend you 80% the mortgage. The government is the mortgage in Singapore. Why? Because the commercial bank wants 8%. Even that is too high for the average middle income Singaporeans. So the government say, we will be the bank of the people for housing. And you can borrow from the government, every citizen, borrow your mortgage after you pay the first 20%, the 80% of the house, the government lends money to you at 2.6% interest. Good for 25 years. Do you like that? What is the difference? 0.1. Your monthly savings in the government is 2.5. Now the government lends you the money to buy your house at 2.6. The spread is only 0.1. So everyone, every Singaporean can enjoy. This is the genius of the housing. The Housing Development Board then went on, registered everyone, including the informal sector. If you don't register, you don't get a house. So if you are in the informal sector, you must register, then you become on the formal sector. You are now registered with the Internal Revenue Authority. No country can develop through the informal sector alone. You have to shift the informal to the formal sector. Everyone carries and shares the burden. So we were able to do that. Now everyone, because we found out that people in the Jokali, Kenya we call Jokali, informal sector, selling vegetables, selling food, they said we are so poor, we cannot pay tax. We are poor people. Then you watch carefully, he's driving a Mercedes. So these guys are not poor, they are just tax evaders. You understand? So whenever you give people a chance, they will not want to pay tax. So everybody shares. So that's how we were able. Now at the height of our housing development program, we built modern housing. We use all the best methods. We use economy of scales. We use standardization. You know, there are only 4 types of windows in the house, 4 sizes, 3 sizes of doors, so that we can mass produce. And then we stockpile. We stockpile the building material, the steel, the cement, the rocks, the sand, and the bricks. If you can control these 5 building material costs, you can control the cost of the home. Yes? The rest are not so important. The government took control of those 5 areas so that anyone from around the world want to build in Singapore, want to be a contractor, you are welcome. Because we know the cost of these 5 items. So you don't even have to design. The design is done, the engineering, architectural work is done. So we just show you, do you want to build? How many units you want to build? 1,000 units, 5,000 units, you can build as a builder, as a contractor. If you can buy the material cheaper than our price, go ahead. But we guarantee you this price. Because in those of you in development and real estate, you know, when you talk about building hundreds of thousands of homes, what happened? Building material will rocket, skyrocket. All the suppliers will think, oh, this is a good kill. So Singapore knows that. So we stockpile it. Today, we were able to, at that time, we were able to deliver a home at 1/3 the market price. Isn't that wonderful? Same home. In private and in public sector, the public home is 1/3 the market price when you get the key. Why? Well, there's several things. Number one, the cost of the land is not included in the price because it perpetually belongs to the government. Number two, when you buy the home, it's a lease purchase. It's good for 99 years. So at the end of 99 years, you surrender to the government. So everyone was able to get a home. You wait. And when you waited for your turn, we were building very hard. At the height of our building program, we were building every 8 minutes, we deliver one completed home. 8 minutes, not 8 years. How do you do that? Well, we had multiple teams, hundreds of teams building. So the Singaporean architect and engineers just look for quality control. We give out as many contracts as people want. So we have built over 1 million homes. So this institution in Singapore is now the world's biggest public real estate developer. And we are a model for developing nations in the African Union as well as in United Nations. National productivity. We want to make sure that every industrial sector is very productive, very competitive. All right? So we benchmark ourselves with the best and most productive countries. Then Infocom Development Singapore. This is an institution that makes sure that Singapore is number one in e-government. All the countries that are developing, they have silo mentalities. Every ministry have their own silo knowledge and information. You go from ministry to ministry, you fill out new forms all the time. In Singapore, you fill out your form one time and it's populated everywhere. All the government institutions talk to each other, and the government with the people, government with business. It makes transparency and efficiency possible. That's part of the transformation of Singapore. Then we have what we call the National Wage Council. In many developing countries, we see that the labor union and the government and the business, they are always at loggerheads. All right? They each try to get a better deal. And they go on strike. The labor go on strike if you don't meet their demands. So we learn growing up. Today, the teachers go on strike. You pay them. Tomorrow, all the rubbish collectors go on strike. Then you pay them. Next day, the nurses go on strike. Then you pay them. Next day, the postmen go on strike. Next day, the firemen go on strike. There's no end to it. So we make a simple law. No strikes in Singapore. You go on strike, you get arrested. There's an industrial arbitration court. You have a problem, go to the court first. And if it's found that you have been mismanaged or you have been bullied, then we give you permission to strike. 2 months ago, we don't have enough bus drivers. We have about 200 drivers we hire from China. They decide to go on strike. That night, all of them got arrested. Next day, charged in the court and deported. So Singapore is serious. You come to Singapore, don't go on strike. You're welcome to work in Singapore. Then, we have national service. So Singapore is now a citizen's army. Every man protects the country. Everyone will be called upon. Whether you are a doctor, a surgeon, an architect, a pharmacist, doesn't matter. Every one of you is a soldier. You have your code word. We regularly practice. Your code word will come out and your people will go on. You must get to your army camp and they time you. You are late, you better give a good reason. The only chance you are given excuse if you are overseas. Alright, everyone can be called. At every hour we can call 50,000 men. And your employer automatically give you leave when you are called. So in the early days, we were a country surrounded by not very friendly neighbors. So guess where we find our trainers for our army? We went to Israel. And we were so afraid our neighbors know about it. We don't call them Israelis, we call them Mexicans. These are the Mexicans training us. Isn't that interesting? Today we have one of the best trained army and equipped army in the world. Now, many young people in the early days hate the army. They say, waste of my time, 2 years in the army. So they go to sleep when they go to the army. Today, it's different. Every man strives to become an officer. You know why? Because after the army, you go to get a job, your interviewer will ask, what was your rank when you left the army? You say, I was a private. They say, you can go home. But you say, I was a captain. I was a major. They say, good. You were trained as a leader, how to make decisions, how to solve problems. We want you. So every man now offer half more year as an officer training. They fight to get in there. Next, we have a very strong, powerful anti-corruption body that reports directly to the Prime Minister, and no one is spared. Of course, you have your day in court, but in Singapore, public as well as private citizens are required, if they are asked to explain their wealth, you must be able to explain your wealth. Where did your wealth come from? And so you have to keep records. And no shame, if you drive a Mercedes, you live in a mansion, you explain where your wealth comes from. Because we do not allow dirty money, money laundering, criminal money in Singapore. Then, transforming education. Today, Singapore has some of the best educational facilities and teachers. We now select the best people to be our teachers. We send them overseas. So today, Singapore is an educational center. All the old schools, we build new ones. So the facilities are all modern. Every 2 students, there is the computer. There are at one time 500,000 students. There are 250,000 computers in the schools. Then, the health sector. We have one of the best healthcare system in Singapore. Singapore is now a medical center, and everyone have access to good public health. And you can choose whether you want to live in a suite when you go to hospital, or share the room with 6 people, or share the room with 12 people. The price is, of course, cheaper, but you get the same service, good service, medical service. Then, we have one natural asset that was a great blessing to us. That is the Port of Singapore Authority. God bless us with a very deep harbor, so that ships, ocean-going ships can come very close to the harbor. And we determined to turn that not into a good port, but a world-class port. And we succeeded. We became the world #1 seaport in the world, competing with London, with Yokohama, with Amsterdam, with Hamburg, with all the ports of the world. We came out #1 in terms of tonnage of cargo and the number of ships that come to Singapore. We were able to do it. You come to Singapore, the port never sleeps. 24 hours, 365 days. And most ships come in less than 12 hours, they are out, sailing away to the next destination. With all the cargo discharged, new cargo put on, water, food, maintenance, everything is done. And they are out of there. And if your cargo arrives in the morning before sundown, that whole container is waiting for you at your door. Civil aviation. Singapore has known to be one of the #1 airport in the world, #1 seaport and airport, #1 airline in the world. Cargo goes through Singapore. 90% of all the cargo that come to Singapore is transshipped again to the region, to other countries. Singapore is a major shipping hub, transportation hub. We only use about 10%. The rest we repackage, redistribute, reorganize it, and send it on. Land transport. Today, Singapore, there's no potholes in Singapore. We know exactly who built this road. Whoever cheated has to pay for it. Alright? All the roads there are lights, street lights in every street. Drainage, So the whole infrastructure in Singapore, in land, air, and sea, has reached first world standard. Now, so we have infrastructure. These are all today is one of the best in the world. These are the capacity building that the government did for the whole nation. For the people of Singapore, they enjoy something special. Today we have accomplished job creation maximum. There is no unemployed people in Singapore. We have full employment in Singapore today. We have more jobs than there are Singaporeans. Today we have to open Singapore to 1.5 million foreigners with proper legal permit and visa, work visa, to live and work in Singapore. So every Singaporean can find a job. If you find a Singaporean without a job, you can assume he's lazy or he has some physical disabilities. Otherwise, there's plenty of jobs in Singapore. And you are all welcome. We are colorblind. Everyone can come and work in Singapore. But you need to follow the rules. We have laws. Okay? Singapore is a fine country. Anything you do wrong, we fine you. Now, then we have wealth creation. Through our housing program is not just a home for shelter. You know, the home is very important. Sociologists tell us when people have lived in a modern home, a clean home, the economic multiplier effect is 7 times, at least. Meaning that if the government put 100 million into housing, the economy will benefit by another 700 million. So that is because people stop getting sick, no absenteeism, so productivity go up. People can read and study and live in a healthy life, their children. So this is very important. But we have a clear rule. Every Singaporean who gets a home must live in it for at least 5 years. After 5 years, you can sell it to another Singaporean who cannot wait. And during that 5 years, you live in it and then you can sell it. After you sell it, you will get at least 3 times the price you bought it. But usually after 5 years, it has appreciated to 4 or 5 times. Can you imagine? Now the government have a new law, no capital gains tax. So you keep the money and you can buy a second home. Everyone have 2 dip of the cherry. And after 5 years, you sell it again and keep the profit. And then stay with your children. Your children now each have their own. You just need to work hard. You don't have to be rich. If you work hard, you will have scholarship. Every year. And the A-level results, when they come out, we invite the best students. We have every year 50,000 students take A-level. Out of that, on the average, about 4,000 of them get all A's. You know A's? That means they don't know any other alphabet. Everything they take, physics is A, chemistry is A, math is A, everything A. We get them together and say, how many of you are willing to serve your nation? If you're willing to sign this contract, and we'll give you full scholarship. And you can go to any university in the world, study any subject you want, come back and serve the nation. In that 35 years, we transformed the whole public service. Every head of department and head of unit is a scholar. And we don't only go pick them because of academic intelligence, but they must also have good leadership qualities, community service. And we were able to transform the whole public service with the best people. Then, today we are one of the cleanest environments in Singapore and healthy. And we know that people, when they learn some skills, the whole society change, technology change. So in Singapore, if you want to learn a new skill, whether you want to learn about bioengineering, or if you even start with computer, if you don't know computer, you want to take computer or even accounting, bookkeeping, the government will pay 50% of the training cost, and your employer only need to pay 50%. This is to encourage everyone to continue to develop and learn new skills. We have very good health subsidy, and then we continue to look to the for the next generation of leaders. And we have sympathetic social welfare, because everyone has a job. But if for some reason a spouse die of an illness or accident, the remaining spouse don't have to pay for that home. That home is paid already by insurance. Then your children, they just need to work hard. They are guaranteed all the way to university. Social welfare is sympathetic and generous, but we do not help lazy people. If you have good health, you're supposed to go work. Then every year, Singapore have surplus in our budget. Every year. We put half of that into our reserve treasury, and the other half we distribute to the citizen. Everyone gets a check, real money. And the other half goes into treasury. Today, Singapore has no external debt. We have over $500 billion in reserve, real money. Wow. We have low corporate tax, low personal income tax. In Singapore, if you make $2,000 a month salary, you are considered low income, no tax. Okay? So we don't tax people who make that kind, it's too low. Singapore, now there is very low inflation rate in Singapore. We control inflation. Singapore, we produce no food. We buy from anywhere in the world based on quality and price. It's too costly to make. It's cheaper to buy. So everything we want to eat, we buy them from anywhere around the world. And controlling inflation, make sure that your money has value. Now, these are some of the information you want to look at. Singapore today, our GDP is about 277 billion according to IMF, or 275 according to World Bank. And there is another way of measuring gross GDP, and that is called the PPP, Purchasing Power Parity. Your US dollar in your country, how much can you buy? So it's an international dollar. According to IMF, we are 327 billion. World Bank say we are 328 billion. That's the ranking. That means roughly we are a $300 billion economy, Singapore. Now, and the per capita in Singapore, because our population is small, 5.3 million, including foreigners. So in reality, Singaporeans, it's just around 4 million people. So you divide the GDP by the population, what do you get? GDP per capita. Our GDP per capita is very high. In Singapore, we are around $51 to $1,000 a year. Or if you go by the PPP, we are over $60,000 a year. That's very high, even higher than the US. So, but we are a small economy. Just average income is very high in Singapore. There's a very important ranking. It's called the ease of doing business. Singapore, for the last 8 years, is number 1. That means it's the easiest place in the world to do business. It's based on 10 different factors for business people. Secondly, the global competitiveness. How competitive are you as an economy? Singapore is number 2 with the whole world. The most competitive place to do business. The least corruption, Singapore is top 5 in the world. Least corrupt place. Then there are other factors. You can see there, cooperation, employer and employee, number 1. National savings, number 6. Country rating, AAA. Life expectancy, 80 years. You come to Singapore, you will live at least up to 80 years old. All right, quality education, number 1. Quality of math education, number 1. Singapore today have employment for all, quality housing for all, quality education for all, quality health care, justice for all, quality infrastructure, number 1 port in the world, World Financial Center, number 1 airport, number 1 educational center, number 1 in e-government, number 1 medical center. And last year, they do a survey, not Singaporean, international company, organization, do a survey of all the international business people in the world, and say, if you have a choice, which city would you like to live and raise your family and work? Singapore came up number 1. Most friendly city for business people to live. And today we have over 15 million people who come as tourists. More than that for business, but every day we have over 40,000 people come to Singapore. Now, I will bring this to a close. We talk about empowering leaders. Today, we need 3 kinds of leaders that are the empowering leaders. Leaders who have a servant heart, who have a shepherd heart, and a steward heart. They are good stewards of our resources. They protect the country, the people, and they provide for them. And they serve as servant leaders by building capacity for the nation and the people. So we are blessed with empowering leaders. Lee Kuan Yew always get the credit, but he understood empowering leadership. Whenever he asked someone to do some major thing, all his cabinet people are carefully chosen and given major tasks to help transform the nation. And he empowers them, he supports them, he makes resources available to them. We need leaders who can dream dreams, visionary leaders, design the country, the future of the country. Secondly, we need leaders who can turn the vision into reality. And thirdly, we need leaders who can maintain whatever is built. These are the 3 categories with different skills. There are 7 important what we call domains of society that I want to bring up to you. The first group is the government leaders. All of you are familiar with this. The second group are the business leaders. The third group are the educational leaders. The fourth group are the media leaders who shape the media opinion of the people. The fifth group are the celebrities, the diva and the divos, the people that hero worship, the sportsmen, the performing arts. The sixth group are the religious leaders. So here in this audience, you have the government leaders as well as the religious leaders. You are 2 of the key pillars, but you need all the other 5 pillars, all the way down to the family. And in Singapore, we encourage and we mobilize the leaders in all these 7 domains of society to help transform the nation. It is not only the job of the government. So understand that for a nation to be transformed, all these leaders must be behind the same vision and embrace the same values. And then our state corporations in Singapore is not there with life support. If they don't perform well, we close them down. All the state corporations in Singapore contribute directly to the growth, development, and wealth of Singapore. Now, we will not go through this. This is just to say that just as character is important and personality is important to every person, a nation also have character, the DNA of your country. The values and your vision form the character of the country. And then, of course, personality is what you see, the performance of the country. Now, I'm not going to go through this, but to show you how we went from vision to reality. Basically, if you have a vision, you need a plan and you need leadership. Then that vision can become a reality. If you have a vision, there's no plan and no leadership, no transforming leadership, that vision stays as a dream. This is Singapore today. Homes, modern homes with roads, freeways. This is how a township, a community look like. With full infrastructure, people live in modern homes like this. This is the latest public homes, 50-story high. People live, this is public housing, 50-story. This is how a whole estate look like. When far at the end you see housing estate, you can all drive to work in 15 minutes, or you can take the train or the taxi and the buses. All the vehicles in Singapore are not more than 10 years old. After 10 years, we export them. Many of you are the beneficiary. This is modern Singapore in the business district. And this is Singapore today. Over 7,000 multinational corporations have their factories in Singapore, supported by over 125 small and medium enterprises. And they work and raise their family, play in Singapore. Dear friends, I share this with you. Today, the story of Singapore, the case study, is to encourage you. It's not to boast about Singapore. Singapore with no resources, we can make it. You need to take faith. You need to believe that it can be done. And you need to have the cooperate with all the other 7 pillars of your country, the leaders, and begin to dream dreams and have a vision and make sure the values are right. And then the leadership who is leading the transformation must be people, men and women of integrity. If it can happen in Singapore, it can happen in every country in Africa. Do you agree? So now is the time. And you are the leaders of your country. You need to get involved in transforming your nation. If not you, who? If not now, when? God bless you.